At Strayer University, we help students like you go from will I to why not. For over 130 years, we've been innovating higher education to make it more affordable, accessible, and attainable so you can reach your goals. Go from thinking, can I, to yes, I can, and keep striving. Visit strayer.edu to learn more. Strayer University is certified to operate in Virginia by Chev and has many campuses, including at 2121 15th Street North in Arlington, Virginia.
Hello, Rag Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that there are way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret, businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks.
Doogie.
Sam.
People cannot seem to decide whether this Premier League cast of teams is very strong or very weak. So it's up to us to get to the bottom of this mystery and deliver the truth to our listeners.
The league being wrapped up midway through the year. One of the worst relegation fights ever. For many, the most competitive league in the world is starting to feel a little boring.
Yes, it was a rotten game, but football is still fantastically entertaining.
You want to see Ipswich play against Man United. You want to see, Southampton play against Manchester City. Can they do something different? Can they overcome that? That's where the intrigue becomes about it.
I mean, it has improved a lot, I would say. I mean, I think we saw 2016, a lot of managers came into the league, including Guardiola in it. Since then, that's nearly a decade ago, and we have seen the Premier League sort of standard go up and up.
Hello everybody and welcome to The Truth. I am your host, Sam Ty, enjoying a work from the garden week this week in glorious sunshine here in London. Joining me is my friend Doogie Critchley. Doogie, do you have a garden to enjoy the sun in?
I do have a garden, although I'm a little bit in trouble at the moment because I've killed most of the grass through a wet mow over the winter. And we are currently in the process of planting grass, which I didn't quite know takes bloody ages, guys. So I wouldn't recommend it.
It does, yeah. It's also a treacherous activity because when you plant you put all the seed down and then all the birds come and try and nick it.
Oh, yeah.
So they just spend all their time on your lawn eating your seeds. I used to live in one of the rented properties I used to live in. I had a study with a window that faced into the garden. And I genuinely, Doogie, for a couple of days, sat there with the window open with a pile of rocks on my desk. And every time a bird or a pigeon, whatever, landed to try and eat all the seeds, I threw rocks at the birds to scare them away. I then later forgot about that, mowed the lawn, and there was a rock went up into the lawnmower. I nearly lost a leg. So this is...
That is not ideal. Yeah, let's stick to football rather than gardening. Clearly, it's not our area whatsoever. I'm not sure whether football is either at points, but it's definitely not gardening.
This is not a gardening podcast, and I can see on my screen Jack smirking, probably thinking that sounds just like the Sam I know so well. Jack, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I don't have a garden, so I don't have any of these problems. So that's what I've been thinking about. So I'm grateful to have a little balcony on days like this, where I can sit outside, but I don't have to deal with any grass-related incidents. So yeah, everything's well, Sam. Everything's well. I'm back from Sicily. Went to Palermo over the weekend for
Lovely.
Final stag of this. Not this whole year, but this season. There was 3 in a row, including my own. So done then, and we've got a month now, and then we've got 3 weddings back to back. Naturally, they're all in the same exact time period, but in reverse order. So that's to come.
This was your pre-season.
Yeah, pre-season's done, and got a month now before the season begins. I've effectively just done the Club World Cup, I imagine.
Fantastic. Sounds good. You'll be relieved to know, by the way, listeners, that I no longer have any grass. It's not that I'm banned from it. It's that I now just have wooden decking, so I don't have any of these issues. But Doogie, while you may think that sounds easier, but you have to oil the deck every year to make sure it's protected. So honestly, it's not less work. It's just different work. Right. Today we are talking about football. Promise. We're talking Premier League. But before we tuck in, a quick word on last week's topic, Italy's Scudetto race. I feel like we just need to dip back into this after a week because Inter lost again and Scott McTominay led Napoli to victory. So, Doogie, last week we talked about whether goal difference would or would not matter. Well, it doesn't matter one jot at the moment because the points are different and Napoli are on top.
Yeah, absolutely. McSauce has now scored 5 of Napoli's last 6 goals. They've won all 3 of those games that those 6 goals were involved in. And Inter, we talked about it last week, they are pretty knackered going into this Barcelona game. Obviously, you'll know the result of the first leg by now. But I think it was the most XG they've conceded in a Serie A game this season against Roma. And it could have been much, much more. They do not look themselves whatsoever for all the reasons we outlined last week in the podcast. So go give that a listen if you haven't already.
It's the clean sheet, Sam. That's what I'm desperately worried about. It has been so long since Inter kept a clean sheet at this point. They conceded to Roma, they conceded 3 to Milan, they conceded to Bologna, they conceded twice to Bayern, they conceded once to Cagliari, who are in a relegation scrap, they conceded twice to Parma, once to Bayern before that, once in the first leg of the Coppa, once to Udinese. You have to go back to the 16th of March for the last time that Inter kept a clean sheet, which was in a 2-0 win against Atalanta, where each team had a player sent off. But that is not a good record for a team who have not outgunned that many this year. They've just done well by keeping things tight. If you're going to get into a firefight with Barcelona, you are going to lose.
Indeed, yeah, worrying stuff. We'll see how that goes. But just briefly on McTominay before we move on, Nicky Bandini wrote a fantastic article, as usual, for The Guardian this week on McTominay, discussing all the many nicknames the people of Naples have given him. MacGyver, McTerminator, McFratum, which is apparently local humour where somebody mispronounced the word McFlurry at a drive-through, or Apri Bottilli, the bottle opener, because he has now opened the scoring in 7 separate games. That is a very useful tool to have in your locker. So we'll keep an eye on that one for sure, but it looks exactly as interesting as we thought it would. Okay, from one intense, tight, dramatic title race to... we didn't get one. We didn't get one at all. Liverpool were crowned champions on Sunday after smashing Spurs. They lifted the trophy with 4 games to spare. But to be honest, they have been champions in all but name since February, something like that. I mean, it's been so obvious for months. That, plus the fact that there's been no relegation drama either, has really pissed people off, Doogie. And it has led to what I consider to be a very polarising debate here about how strong this Premier League is.
Yeah, absolutely. There are arguments that it isn't as weak as people think. There are arguments that it is as bad as people think. I'm actually going to start by outlining the reasons why people think it's bad and maybe add a little bit more detail to the reasons that you've outlined there. The relegation struggle is a big one. I mean, the newly promoted sides this season have taken a combined 50 points from 34 fixtures each. They've won 10 of 102 matches. They've scored 85 goals between them in 102 games, and they've conceded 230 goals in 102 games. Last season, across the entire season, the newly promoted sides took 66 points. That is unlikely to be matched. They won 14 of their games. They scored 129 goals. So they need to score 45 more goals in the remaining, 4 each to get to that tally. And they are on track to concede a similar amount. But their goals per game from the newly promoted sides, or the relegated sides, I should say, has gone from 1.1 to 0.8. Last season, the gap was 6 points between 17th and 18th. This year, it is currently 15. The previous largest gap in Premier League history was 13 points in 2000-2001. And with the way Ipswich are playing at the moment, I mean, West Ham aren't really doing them any favours either, but Spurs too, maybe that gap will further increase. So we could have the biggest ever gap between 17th and 18th. So there's been literally no relegation battle whatsoever this year. The title race. So we've already touched on Serie A. Napoli 3 points clear with 4 games to go. Barca are 4 points clear of Real with 5 to go as it stands. that feels less close than it actually is, given the momentum that Barcelona have, but it will still go down to the wire potentially, and there's an El Clasico in there too. Bayern, it looks like they're now clear, but that's actually up until the last couple of weeks has been relatively close. PSG, like, Liverpool in the Premier League, have been completely dominant in there as it stands. But Liverpool, 15 points clear of Arsenal with 4 games to go. They've been top since the 2nd of November, and they haven't lost that spot since. The biggest winning margin in Premier League history are City's 19 in 2017-18 when they did the Centurion season. It was then Liverpool's 18 in 1920, where I think they went unbeaten for the first 27 games of the campaign, and United's 18 in 1999-2000. So we could have a record-breaking gap between first and second. And you look at the Champions League race as well. Arsenal currently on track for 74 points. That's 15 points fewer than they got last season when they finished second. They are currently second. The last team to finish second with fewer points than the 74 that Arsenal are currently on track for was Arsenal in 2015-16 behind Leicester, which is commonly accepted to be a campaign where there was very little competition in that title race as well. City are 4th as it stands, and they're on track for 68 points. The last time the 4th side finished with fewer points was in 2021. And I think if you look throughout this Premier League table, what is just so dominant is that the big clubs have disappointed, which does affect the excitement and the feeling of quality in the competition. City on track for 68 points, as I said. That's their worst tally since 2015-16 when they finished 4th. They've lost 9 games this season. They only lost 12 in the last 3 completed seasons combined. United, they're currently 14th. They've won 10 and lost 15 of their 34 games. They've scored 39 goals in 34 games. And no matter what you say about the Premier League, United are still the club that hoovers up the most headlines. They are the club that generates the most news. United being bad does affect the overall picture of the league, or being this bad in particular. Spurs, they are lucky that United have also been this dreadful, because it's kind of gone under the radar to the extent that it probably should have, because they've lost 19 league games this season. And actually the campaign that this reminds me of the most is not Leicester's title-winning campaign, because I do think Liverpool are an excellent side, which I think we'll no doubt cover when we talk about the strengths of the Premier League this season. But this season reminds me of 2020-21. That year, City won the league with 86 points. They were 12 ahead of United. Liverpool got struck down with major injuries. Van Dijk only started 5 league games. Gomez, who'd been their regular in the 1920 season, he only started 6. Henderson missed a number of games with injury as well. It was the year that Nat Phillips and Reece Williams, who I think's in League 2 now with Morecambe.
I think he's been relegated from League 2. It's
pretty bleak, yeah. And these were their starting centre-backs. And that year as well, similarly to this year, there was an 11-point gap between 17th place Burnley and 18th place Fulham. So it hasn't had the drama at either end of the table, Sam. But I don't know whether it's easy to mistake entertaining top and bottom of the league for a lack of quality throughout. Because I think if particularly you look at the European results of the Premier League sides, suggests that it's not all doom and gloom.
Yeah, what I struggle with here is the idea that the bottom 3 are so far adrift and that, there's no relegation drama, etc., does not equate to, in my opinion, a weak league. And to a slightly lesser extent, but still truly, I don't think that Liverpool running away with it at top also equates to a weaker league. I think, I'm struggling to know where to start with this, but I think maybe if we start with, maybe start in the middle here, the strength of the middle of the Premier League. Basically, anyone down to 12th in the Premier League is really good. Like, they're really good teams. So all the way down to basically you've got Palace in 12th here. And the fact that all those teams are so closely packed together as well, taking points off each other, suggests there's not a lot between them. And yet these teams are all consistently taking points off the traditional big clubs. So you've got, City and a couple of others dropping down into places that you didn't really think that they would. But it's Brentford and it's Palace and it's Fulham that have ruined their day. And they've done it quite consistently, which suggests that actually this middle order of the Premier League is well capable, and not just on their day, but just well capable on a pretty consistent basis of taking points off the Premier League's big boys. And we know the Premier League's big boys are still good, because England has 4 teams in European semi-finals, and Villa made it to the quarters and ran PSG incredibly close. The PSG team that was crowned the best in the world once they beat the best in the world, Liverpool. So we know, using Europe as a benchmark, that actually these teams are pretty good. And 14th place Man United and 16th place Spurs are in Europa League semi-finals. It's been a weird season for those guys, but when they need to, they can show quality. So even as far down as 14th and 16th still seems to be able to beat most of Europe's best in the second-tier competition. So it can't be too bad down there. And especially since Arsenal and Villa did so well in the Champions League, it's just kind of City as that kind of horrible outlier, I think, to a point. But ultimately, the bottom 3, let's go back to that a sec, the fact that they're so rubbish, well, everybody above them beat them because they're all a lot better than them. And that in itself, for me, is a sign of quality, because we're now looking at that entrenched 17 teams. The bottom 3 are going to go down again. It's our worst fears confirmed. The Premier League money will stay with 17 clubs, and another 3 will be thrown into the slaughter next season. The Premier League is not defined by its weakest club or its strongest club. I think it's defined by its median quality. And the median quality right now is like these 17 teams all looking pretty damn good.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, particularly just the quirks of European competition this year. The fact that Man United 14th in the Premier League, but they're unbeaten in the Europa League, which just feels bizarre, to be honest. And they've ridden their luck at times as well, but they've played FC Porto, they've played Fenerbahce, they've played Bodo Glimt, who have a reputation for giant killing. They played Rangers, they played Real Sociedad twice, who admittedly aren't having as good a year as they've normally had. They played Lyon twice as well. But only Lyon have scored more goals than United's 28 in the Europa League, going into the semi-finals, I should add. They've got the best expected goal difference per 90 of any side in the competition. So that again suggests that the quality of chances they're creating versus conceding in that competition is the best around. And similarly, Spurs, 16th in the Premier League, but finished 4th in the league phase. They then beat AZ Alkmaar, they beat Eintracht Frankfurt. They rode their luck in that second leg as well, but it was pretty impressive. Chelsea, who have been very, very up and down. And look, they should dominate the Conference League based on money spent over the last few years for sure. But they've won 9 out of 10 in the Conference League. Liverpool got knocked out of the Champions League by a PSG side that are still on for the treble, that then knocked out Aston Villa, that then have a very decent chance of knocking out Arsenal as well. PSG have been probably, along with Barcelona, the outstanding sides in Europe since November time. So I don't think there's anything too disastrous with the quality at the top of the league, and the European results back that up.
Here's an interesting question for you. City dropping off like this. So obviously they got the Rodri injury early on in the season, and it's derailed them. And there's other issues that are plaguing them. They have actually had probably an underreported amount of injury issues. Like all 4 of their main centre backs have spent time either like in surgery or just 6 to 8 weeks out at times this season, and they had to go into January and spend some money just to stay afloat. Fine, but would this City drop off have been anywhere near as bad 4 years ago? Let's take they've fallen from point A to point B without Rodri, and then down to point C without a few others. If this was 4 years ago, would they have dropped as many points in the same scenario? Because would Bournemouth, Brighton, Spurs, Palace, Brentford, Villa and Everton all have been able to either beat them or take points off them in the space of about 2.5 months? I just don't think those clubs 4 years ago would have had it in them to do it. So City, while they would have dropped off and obviously been made to look a lot worse than someone like Liverpool, they wouldn't have been punished so harshly because the strength of the league wasn't quite there. And of course, it's something we often talk about, but I benchmark it on Bournemouth signed Porto's striker. The reason Bournemouth are able to do this now is because they lost Solanke and they signed Porto's striker. And Brighton have moved up a weight class. They started signing £30 million players. So they take Celtic's best. They take Feyenoord's most promising. They're in the market for Carlos Baleba now rather than plucking Caicedo from the depths of South America. Villa got to January and they signed Asensio and Rashford. And the other side of this coin is that Brentford have now been in the Premier League for long enough. They don't have to sell Brian Mbeumo. He stays, right? And Newcastle keep Isak and they keep Bruno. for anything less than the release clause, they're not going anywhere. 4 years ago, these clubs cannot hold on to these assets. And 15 years ago, it was Man United and it was Liverpool and it was Arsenal just pillaging the Premier League for the next best players to make sure that gap continues to exist. And you've got this combination of these teams being able to go and take the best players from Europe as well, and then keep them, right? They don't get robbed off them so often. It has most certainly strengthened the middle order of the Premier League. And it has meant that when City do dip down like this, they're an easy target for so many of these clubs who now are suddenly so much better and would not have been in a position to pick at them 4 years ago.
At Strayer University, we help students like you go from, is it possible, to anything is possible by offering access to up to 10 no-cost gen ed courses, so you can reach your goals affordably and fast. Visit strayer.edu to learn more. No-cost gen eds provided by Strayer University affiliate Sophia. Eligibility rules apply. Connect with us for details. Strayer University is certified to operate in Virginia by Chev and has many campuses, including at 2121 15th Street North in Arlington, Virginia.
What I think is really interesting is, I call this the kind of Premier League middle class. And I think that to kind of back up your point there, Sam, the other thing is that when bigger clubs, there are still, you look at the Milan Giants or a Bayern Munich or someone like that coming in for clubs who are playing well for a Bournemouth or a Fulham or a Brentford, right? They can go, all right, yeah, fine, 60 million.
Yeah.
Because they're like, we don't need to financially sell to continue to strengthen the model, especially if now there is this point with the Premier League. And we talked about this obviously in that earlier episode when we were saying, what do championships clubs need to do to kind of step up and stay up? Well, you have to be a bit lucky with someone playing badly and having a bad season. And I think that if there was maybe a more strength in depth argument, you could maybe make the example that West Ham have had a pretty poor season, and maybe someone with a little bit more gumption / experience / all of those things we talked about in those episodes would be able to maybe take advantage of that a little bit more. But you still have to be lucky because, if West Ham are currently the worst that the Premier League have to offer that isn't in the relegation zone, that's still an incredibly talented squad. They're just having a down year, right? And I do think that there is now this level where, Bayern Munich come in for Joao Palhinha and Fulham go, all right, 50 million. And they go, oh, we're not going to pay that. All right, he'll stay. That's fine. He'll stay here.
And, you can go, but if we don't sign a replacement, we can't sanction the deal.
Precisely. There's no more kind of element of that. And I do think that comes from one, financial muscle, but also it means that, the clubs in the middle have had to be smart. I wonder if this is just a timing thing. I wonder if there is an element here where, it's notable, I think, that Fulham, Forest and Bournemouth all came up together and in different ways have now established themselves firmly as Premier League sides. Brentford the year before. And you're kind of like, okay, 3 years down, how scary is that for teams coming up into the Premier League in terms of trying to match it? You have to kind of go all out. And there's been some interesting discussions. I know this isn't necessarily where we're going, but there's been some interesting discussions recently in terms of Burnley and Leeds in particular going, well, we might have to fire the manager. He just got us promoted. We might have to fire the manager because we might have to upgrade absolutely everything in order to actually compete at this point. And that means that this middle class is stronger. It means that there are these battles for the bottom of Europe, which weren't necessarily in play a couple of years ago. One, because the Conference League wasn't as big a thing. And two, because those spaces were locked up. But you have a bad year now. You struggle in the middle. You don't recruit smartly. You're going to get dragged downwards because the people are waiting to step up in a different way.
Well, it nearly happened to Brentford at the end of last season, didn't they? With a bit of an injury crisis and not some rough form. And Brentford was suddenly, God, they need to win a couple of games here. Well, you can slip away. And West Ham have kind of in the same scenario. It's just that the bottom cast are even weaker or even worse. So, Diggy, one thing that comes to mind here, just as Jack was talking about Fulham and Bayern and all that, is actually managers. Surely a part of this is like, look at who manages Fulham, Palace, Bournemouth, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fact that we've got a Europa League winning manager at Crystal Palace is something that just wouldn't have happened 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago. It's absolutely mind-boggling. The fact that we've got a Europa League dominating manager at Villa, and no disrespect to Villa, massive club in the past, but I've had a really up and down last 10, 15 years as well. 7th in the Premier League, but having reached the quarterfinals of the Champions League. The fact that we've got a club in Forest that we're able to spend a huge, vast sum. And look, I'm not taking away from what they've done as well, but they were able to spend vast amounts of money and
spent too much money, if anything.
And now they've ended up with a sort of 13, 14 pretty high quality players that they're able to, challenge for Champions League football this year. The fact that Bournemouth already have their best ever Premier League points tally. Brentford have already got 7 more points than last year. It's crazy. And all these clubs, we talk about the thrills of them going forward. Most of these guys have a player that could play for probably a Champions League club in another country or a European level in another country for sure. They all have a manager that, lots of them, that will press you off the pitch and work you off the pitch and are equally fit and have absolutely no fear of going to these big stadiums like North London Stadium or Old Trafford in particular. And you've also got a situation where some players on the back of a big international summer have had a drop-off this year at the biggest clubs. You look at how tired lots of City stars have looked this year: De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva, Gundogan, etc. The fact Cole Palmer, Ollie Watkins has had a poor year. Liverpool have still managed to go on a 26-match unbeaten run this year. I mean, I don't think anyone at Liverpool is arguing that they've been poor this year or that it's been a poor league. They've had to work really hard for a lot of those wins. They haven't always been smashing teams apart. And they've gone on a longer unbeaten run than any of Pep's sides in a single season. It's absolutely been remarkable. And try tell Mo Salah that it's a forgettable campaign when you've put up 46 league goals and assists at this stage of the campaign. That's 14 more than next best Harry Kane in Europe. He's contributed to a league goal every 65 minutes. This will go down in Premier League history as one of the best campaigns ever. Erling Haaland still managed to score 21 goals in 28 games for a struggling City side. That's remarkable. Alexander Isak, one of the stories of the campaign as well. 22 goals and 6 assists for a Newcastle side that had injury issues, that had a situation where they couldn't really strengthen over the previous few windows as well. There are serious storylines to get excited about. And I just don't think that we can have a situation where just because your season and club, whether you support a big club or not, has maybe slightly underperformed this year, United fans, Spurs fans, City fans. But you can A, invalidate Liverpool's title win, and B, make this, it's a very top six-centric view to think that it's been a poor Premier League this year, when Forest fans will remember this campaign forever, Villa fans will in many ways, Fulham have had a lot of fun, so have Brighton, Bournemouth, Palace, Brentford. Wolves have been on an amazing run since Vitor Pereira took over. I think they're
Wolves are the form team in the league, mate. 6 wins in a row. They're the only team in the league that have won all of their last 6 games.
It's crazy. And is the league better for 4 teams getting over 75 points? I'm not quite so sure. I think it's been a really entertaining campaign in many ways. Just if you're a United or Spurs fan or City fan, you've probably not enjoyed it very much at all.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just going to sort of pick up on something you said there about a lot of these teams in kind of like the middle order or just below the traditional big 6 having a couple of players or having a player here that is close to elite or is very, very good. Maybe that wouldn't have happened before. There was a really good piece of analysis done by John Muller. He looked at, it's a very simple piece of analysis, but it works really, really well. Where the top 300 players according to transfer marked value. So it's an inexact science, but just use it as a ballpark, where the 300 most valuable players play their football this season compared to 2014-15. So here are the statistics. Back in 2014-15, 29% of the top 300 most valuable players played for the Premier League Big Six, 7% of them played for the rest of English clubs, and 65% of them were in Europe. Fast forward 10 years, 32% play for Big Six clubs, so only 3% more. 21% play for the rest of England. So, wow. As in up 14%, 7 up to 21, and that means 47% are in Europe. So the European percentage here has gone down from 65% to 47%. And the rest of England, so that's the middle order we're talking about, as Jack calls it, the middle class here, has gone from 7% to 21%. This is a very simple way of telling you that now the majority of the most expensive or most valuable players in the world play in the Premier League, and 20% of them play for clubs like Newcastle, Bournemouth, Villa, Forest, Brentford. That is a true show of strength. That is a signal. And it's a reason why when City fumble around post-Rodri and don't really have a midfield, they get bitten. It's why Arsenal, when they lose their entire forward line to injury, suddenly find it really quite difficult, because it wasn't like it was. And it's the reason why when Chelsea get a couple of defensive injuries, they look like they can't plug a leak anywhere. Because now, when you are in a vulnerable state, the middle of the league pounces. Liverpool have just done incredibly well to rise above it all. Someone was going to, and it's them.
100%. I also think that there's a feeling around Europe that because Real Madrid had such a poor Champions League campaign by their standards, because City had such a poor Champions League campaign by their standards, and because every top side in Europe, because of the length of this season and because of the injuries they've had and the extra games, have had a dip at some stage. Whether it was PSG getting off to a slow start, Barca had that weird period around the sort of turn of the year where they couldn't really win a game. Arsenal have obviously drawn so many games in the Premier League. It doesn't feel like there's a real outstanding side in Europe. But actually, I look at these lineups we've got for these semi-finals this week, and I just think it's so refreshing. New teams, the fact that we will have a side that has never won the Champions League in the final once again in PSG or Arsenal. The fact that Hansi Flick has played some of the most sort of kamikaze, entertaining football in Europe and could still win a treble. The fact Luis Enrique, they got rid of their best player in the club's entire history and could win a treble. I think it's absolutely fascinating. And I love the fact that City and Real Madrid, who have dominated for so long in Europe and have consistently felt like the best teams in Europe, just weren't anywhere near it this year. And again, a behemoth of world football, Bayern, probably a little bit in transition under a manager that was fairly lucky to get that job, was 7th, 8th choice, etc., but still played pretty well in the Champions League in parts, was pretty unlucky to lose to Inter Milan. The fact Inter could, up until recently, have won a treble, there's been so much to get excited about. And actually, it just feels like there's been a real kind of evening out of football across the continent and in the Premier League because of the length of the campaign.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, looking at we made this point, I think, on a pod a few weeks ago, but this quartet of Champions League semi-finalists, I appreciate Inter feel like, we'll see what happens. Obviously, you'll know as you listen to this what happened to Inter on Wednesday, but obviously feels like they're flagging. But these four teams, they feel really, really good on paper, at least. And we compare it to, the semi-finalists from last year, and it was Tuchel's Bayern, who were not good. It was Dortmund, who, as we know, are just not that good. And they managed to beat a severely fragile and damaged PSG side. And that's how bad PSG were this time last year. It was only really Real Madrid that were a legitimate contender, and they went and did the business. This year, Madrid have looked so far off the top pace. But that's European stuff. We've digressed a bit.
Sam, just on one point on that, and I think that maybe this is where I'll be going with all of it. Having listened to what the two of you have said there, I think that there feels like a sense of egalitarianism that has started to pervade football a little bit more. And maybe that's unfair to put in the context of Premier League versus the rest, as we were talking about earlier, the fact that Spurs and Manchester United have reached these semi-finals potentially suggests that there is a little bit too much power with the Premier League. But we're just talking about four teams in the Champions League semi-finals who feel on a relatively even keel. We've been saying on ranks for the entire knockout stage almost, it's like 7-8 teams felt like they could win the Champions League this year. It felt incredibly open. And we've just talked about the fact that if you're having a bad year in the Premier League, you are now getting pegged back down by this middle class who are all scrapping for Europe. We got Crystal Palace into an FA Cup final at the same point. And I wonder if there is just an element of this that you can look at and say, okay, the Premier League has kind of evened itself out in terms of the old powers. If you are no longer capable of sitting at the same table in terms of personnel or in terms of tactics, and look, that can happen by injury and lots of different reasons. But just for whatever reason, if you're not sitting at that top table, if you are not, knocking teams down regularly, then you're going to get caught. You're going to get caught into this middle scrap. You're going to get pulled into the vortex. And I wonder if there is an element of that kind of leveling out of things that is the reason that there was a lot of people in the top levels of football in those boardrooms trying to make things different, trying to change it, make it a European Super League. Because when the Premier League started, there was such a split of money that meant that the bigger teams got more of the TV revenues, et cetera, et cetera. And we see this obviously in La Liga, and they're trying to change things at the moment in terms of giving that more of an even split. And Barcelona and Real Madrid in particular, I think, are like, no, whoa, we want that money, please. Thank you very, very much. And I wonder if there is just a level, like kind of interesting point to make there that, you know, I'm sure that the people writing the headlines, etc., for a while, it's great that Manchester United aren't doing well because they draw headlines and they draw clicks and they draw, engagement, especially when they're doing badly. But, a strong Premier League, as Doogie kind of alluded to earlier, probably has a stronger Manchester United in it. But I do think it's interesting that we're seeing this kind of leveling out. And I wonder if there are boards and boardrooms currently scrabbling, not just in the Premier League, but around Europe at some points as well, going, not sure I really like this, that, you can get a smart coach. And if you're a smart, well-run club, you can start to punch upwards and you can make that money. Just something that crossed my mind when I was listening to the two of you talk about it.
Jack accuses Premier League boardrooms of running scared. Running scared.
It wouldn't be the worst thing I've said on this podcast. We're probably all right.
It wouldn't actually, no. I've got a bit of a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory to finish off with, if you like.
Go for it.
And I'm not going to come across as I don't come across as a sympathiser or an apologist here, because you know who I support and it's got nothing to do with them. But I genuinely think that part of this narrative of the Premier League is weak is because people don't like it when Liverpool win. Genuinely. Like, they have huge detractors. There are lots of people out there who hate it when Liverpool win trophies and they do well. And I think a lot of people do genuinely try to decry it. And I think back to the last time we had a title when someone tried to besmirch it, or a community tried to besmirch it. It was Liverpool's win during COVID. Asterisk. It's COVID. It wasn't a real season. No crowds. Doesn't count. And then this year, weak Premier League, terrible Premier League. No, City dropped off, terrible. And I'm just like, well, I don't know, man. They could finish with like 92 points. It looks like a pretty good Premier League to me. And I think Liverpool they've benefited a little bit from a City drop off. I think Jurgen Klopp is probably sat there thinking, bloody hell, are you serious? I was there 9 years. 9 years I had to put up with Pep and his 90-point machines, 95-point machines. The year I go, they lose Rodri and just, he must be feeling really annoyed. And I absolutely get it. City drop off and Liverpool have had very few injuries. They've obviously managed the squad pretty well.
You say that, but Alisson was out for a long period, and Kelleher walked in and just did the business. Liverpool have managed their injuries. Yes, they've had potentially less in terms of key positions than anyone else, but they've just managed their injuries better than everyone else. I think, to add to your point, Sam, there's also always Arsenal detractors. And I think it comes from fan bases who haven't won for a while, or hadn't won for an extended period. And then they come into it and they're like, everyone gets a bit excited and then everyone's knocking it down again. And I wonder if the fact that it was Liverpool-Arsenal for a long period, and that was kind of the two horses in the race, even if one was lagging behind the other at some distance, that would have maybe taken away from the same angle. But yeah, I think you're absolutely bang on to say what you say about Liverpool. I think back to it now, and you think about how many teams have gone through bad runs in this season, right? Or difficult periods. Liverpool's difficult periods have been like 45 minutes, 90 minutes at push. That is an unbelievable level of consistency to keep through the entire season. Anyone detracting from that, it is almost certainly trying to apply an agenda of some description.
Yeah, 100%. I also think that on the general debate of the strength of the Premier League, the best thing about the Premier League is its own arrogance. It's always argued it's been the best, even when it clearly wasn't. Pre-Pep and pre-Klopp, you still had people arguing that the Premier League was by far the best in the world, as we were watching Messi and Ronaldo consistently win Champions League, break record after record in these amazing sides. And yes, since particularly Guardiola turned City into that machine, I think the Premier League probably has become the best league in the world. But I think you can always look too far into European results as well, but there's been a clear shift in terms of the amount of English finalists. There's not actually been as many English winners as potentially there could have been, because they've often lost to Real Madrid, but they've consistently got there. But it was only a year ago that, it was considered a strong Premier League with a great title race, but only one side reached a European semi-final, and that was Aston Villa in the Conference League. Cool. So you can kind of go a little bit too far just on the basis of anything. I think, as it's been for a long time, the Premier League is very strong. It's getting deeper and deeper than ever, and some of the big teams fell off this year. But it doesn't detract, as we keep on saying, from Liverpool's phenomenal season.
Right. So, Doogie, when we planned this topic, I text you and I asked you, do you feel very strongly either way on strong or weak? Because I clearly, as you will have just heard over the last 40 minutes or so, feel very strongly that this is a strong Premier League. I'm certainly not mincing my words on that one. I was hoping you might say weak, so we could have a very natural, positively spirited and polite argument. And when I text you asking how you feel, you wrote, weak, I think, but I need to have a proper think. Clearly, once you'd had a proper think, you came to the viewpoint of strong.
I did 36 minutes of live thinking, and I've come to my conclusion now. But I do, you can see the argument in terms of entertainment, that it hasn't been as entertaining as previous years. But does that mean that the quality has been worse in it? I think you made a very good point. And I think we all kind of came to the same conclusion, that it is very strong in terms of depth. And yeah, it's not been a vintage season. I don't think I'll remember it. I'm not going to get a tattoo of it. But, there's been a lot of things to enjoy at the same time, and it's been there.
I just don't think you should get any tattoos of any specific Premier League seasons.
Especially when your club's not in it.
Just a general season. I just love 24-25 now.
It was just a great season. Right, I think it's time to go and watch PSG play Arsenal, guys.
Huge.
Yes.
Yeah, big one. Right, Doogie, thanks for your wisdom here, and I'm glad you agree with me.
Pleasure. Yeah, it was a real topsy-turvy one from me, but I did come out on the side of Sam.
Yes, indeed. Jack, thank you as well.
Thank you, Sam. More egalitarian Premier Leagues as far as I'm concerned. Actually, I would level the playing field even more.
Running scared. All right, cheers to you, Rank Squad, as well. We will see you next week.
At Strayer University, we help students like you go from, is it possible, to anything is possible by offering access to up to 10 no-cost gen ed courses, so you can reach your goals affordably and fast. Visit strayer.edu to learn more. No-cost gen eds provided by Strayer University affiliate Sophia. Eligibility rules apply. Connect with us for details. Strayer University is certified to operate in Virginia by Chev and has many campuses, including at 2121 15th Street North in Arlington, Virginia.
Hello, Rag Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret, businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks.